for me, when anybody asks me what Ayurveda is, for me, it's almost like a user manual, how to utilize our body properly. User manual is the book which comes with almost all our gadgets and electronic devices. There are three basic aspects that Ayurveda talks to us about health. The first thing is how to look at the body, mind, and soul as a one whole unit, and how to analyze the um, influence of different factors related to our body and mind. How do they influence each other, and how to actually identify different components in our body, not restricted to just the symptoms or particular organs or organ system, but on the basis of functions and qualities, very simple functions and qualities like movement or circulation or digestion, and qualities like heat or cold or oiliness or dryness. These simple aspects, how to understand it. That's the first main topic Ayurveda talks to us about. Another important part is to see, Ayurveda, we always say, is focused on prevention, but more than say prevention of an illness, I would say Ayurveda is about how to operate this magnificent and complex system properly. And that operation is again unique in this perspective that every person has a unique balance and a unique nature. So we need to identify who you are, where you are in terms of this process of balancing, and how your body is at the moment decides what kind of a routine, what kind of an activity pattern, etc. is required for you. So it's not just about treatments and herbs and plants. Ayurveda is about identifying yourself in a unique way, understanding what's that perfect rhythm or activity pattern, diet pattern, and lifestyle pattern for you in order to maintain health and prevent illness. And then comes, like any user manual, troubleshooting. If anything goes wrong, how we can take care of those symptoms. And Ayurveda talks about simpler symptoms and health issues, how it can be treated by changing our diet, changing our lifestyle, which we will try and share some information in this class. But along with that, also talks about chronic illnesses and more severe illness, and how it can be approached by the process of deeper cleansing, panchakarma, internal sort of resetting through various cleansing methods. So this is my viewpoint of Ayurveda. So keeping that in mind, it will be more helpful to understand when we are trying to see different health issues. It's not about the symptoms or individual signs that a person experiences. It's more about who that person is, and there is always that uniqueness in the treatment perspective when it comes to Ayurvedic remedies, and it's not just symptom based. So keeping that in perspective, we are also going to talk about symptoms and how to take care of it, how to understand it in terms of women's health specifically. But that's not actually a definite treatment plan. It's sort of a outline, and definitely if you're looking for specific help, you should approach somebody who can guide you appropriately. If Ayurveda is a user manual and trying to understand how unique each of us are, the basic sort of scale or tool that we use to understand this uniqueness is called as the doshas. And doshas sometimes is misidentified as just body types, but it's not three different categories of people or three different nature inside in different people. It's more about set of functions and qualities, like I was mentioning how Ayurveda sees the whole system, body, mind, and soul as one unit. So if we look at the three dosha concept, it says that health ideally is a balance of three set of functions, and the first one is vata, second is pitta, and third is kapha. When we say vata function, it's mostly concerned with, it's a very deep topic. If somebody wants to go into it, that's in itself like a good hour, couple of hours long class. But we will go into it sort of in simple words. Like when I say vata, what we are trying to understand is not a particular substance in anybody's body or a particular personality type. By vata, we are understanding certain reflections of nature itself in our body, how nature is reflecting its air and space and lighter elements onto our body function, and that reflects onto our body's natural movement, that energy of doing activities, that energy of thinking out of the box, creative thinking. So all this lightness and movement together, we categorize it as an impact or effect of air and space and call them by the name Vata. And Vata usually is identified physically by the quality of cold and dry nature. And this coldness is not just, it's not about feeling cold. It's not about just feeling cold or dryness on the skin. Coldness can manifest in various different ways. It can affect the digestive fire and make the appetite lower. It can have an effect on our circulation in general. Dryness, again, is not just skin dryness. It could be anywhere in the body, clicking sound from the joints, degenerative changes in the cartilages. Dryness can manifest in any mucous membrane or our skin. So it's a general idea of how air and space reflects onto our body. Pitta, again, represents, similar to Vata, it represents fire and water, fire predominantly. So it's mostly concerned with that transformative functions happening in the body, digestion, enzymes, hormones. So when we talk about women's health specifically, we'll be talking a lot about Pitta dosha and how we can pacify it through activity, diet, herbs, etc. Pitta is mostly categorized as the transformative function, not just happening in the digestive system, anywhere in the body. In the mind also, it can be quite sort of related to focused, goal-oriented, problem-solving. That kind of capabilities comes from that Pitta nature inside us. And Pitta is also sort of known to create, if out of balance, can create like acidic symptoms and increase in body heat, feeling uncomfortable in warmer weather, reaction towards sunlight, etc., etc. That hot and oily nature sometimes also reflect as some of the issues like related to skin we'll be talking about now. And Kapha is the third dosha, which is reflecting water and earth, more heavier elements, and it represents that nourishment, growth, tissue repair, memory, groundedness, calmness, so all the factors which are related to nourishing and heavy nature of water and earth. And Kapha function inside our body represents sort of that ability to repair. It's very important to actually heal quickly. Kapha is also related to our respiratory function. In our mind, it represents calmness, groundedness. If out of balance, it can create issues like water retention, weight gain. In the mind, it can create sort of stubborn ideas and thoughts. But physically, you might notice more sort of oiliness externally, or fat deposits in the body, weight gain, or coldness, which is similar to like Vata, like lowering the digestive fire, feeling cold and feeling like cold extremities, etc., can happen with the Kapha sort of imbalance. Ideally, health is defined as a balance of all three, which we try to maintain in different situations. There is also this factor of uniqueness of every person, where we understand that we are born with a particular, not an imbalance, a nature, which sort of defines what we naturally have affinity towards and what we like and what we dislike. So those factors, if we pay attention to, if we listen to our body, if we listen to our affinities and what we like, that usually helps maintain the dosha balance in a good way, and that doesn't progress into any health issues. If it progresses into health issues, then we try and focus on, instead of the symptom, try and focus on the individual doshas or the multiple factors, including doshas, that might be causing it, and try and treat these causative factors, which gives us the upper hand, because we naturally have to focus on all the functions and qualities related to those doshas. So naturally, mind, emotions, all the factors, activities, all of that come into the treatment plan without much extra effort, because you're not focusing just on the symptoms. So this is the sort of the basic background of Ayurveda, we are going to talk about when we speak about symptoms, we are going to focus on individual situation. Again, like I said, every person is unique, so the situation can be different, but there are certain underlying changes that commonly happen in these health conditions, especially in women's health related to the cycles and the cyclic pattern of hormonal changes happening. And there are multiple places where it can go wrong. And how do you identify it? How do you take precautions and understand the risk factors involved? And how do you sort of treat if you are already suffering from any of those? Skin and hormones. Yes, I think it is one of the most common issues faced by women generally during the menarche, starting of the menstrual cycle, or even sort of the teenage time to even in adult onset also. There could be one of the major issues that can affect is acne. Acne, even though it's a single name, it's sort of like a like sort of more related to superficial symptoms. Ayurveda understand it as an external manifestation of a more deeper imbalance. So it's considered to be a very important situation where if we treat and take precautions, it can prevent any further issues related to hormones. It can act as a good indicator whether our overall hormonal health is in good shape. There are various types, so I'm not going to go into sort of types of acne on the basis of how it appears, like cyst or papules, pustules, blackheads, whiteheads, etc. I'm going to look at acne as sort of what immediately causes it, especially in adult onset acne. In teenage acne, the most common cause is very well known is the hormonal changes related to the puberty, which causes an excess sebaceous gland secretion. So more sebum and oils are secreted. When there is reason enough to clog those channels of sebum, then they actually become sort of clogged, and that forms acne, or it can again go into further inflammation and be an inflamed acne. But I think it's important to understand that again we can see the dosha influence there, especially in say in adult onset acne. One of the triggering factors sometimes which we see in adult onset acne is change in routine and stress. Stress factors can trigger it. Even though we are talking about hormones, the effect of hormones directly on the acne before that, stress can have an influence on how our hormonal system behaves. And that kind of acne usually comes in sort of waves, and it's always sort of characterized by being painful as well. And there could be other signs of dryness and dehydration. There could be digestive symptoms associated with it, like constipation or bloatedness. There could be factors related to like mind and emotions, where there is lack of focus, or all the symptoms which we would consider as vata aggravated symptom. And that's a vata predominant acne. When pitta predominant acne, like I said, is more sort of common during the pitta, and kapha predominant acne are more predominant during the teenage phase, but it can also happen during, say, the luteal phase, sort of the end phase before the menstrual cycle. The menstruation happens in the adult menstruation cycle, and that usually is of more inflammation, characterized by inflammation. There will be tendency for say redness, burning sensation. There could be other signs of pitta aggravation, like acidity or digestive symptoms, again related to more heat and acidic changes. There could be also factors related to the menstrual cycle, which might actually change or be irregular when the acne type is related to pitta imbalance. Kapha imbalance usually is kapha is that oily, heavy nature. If you remember when I spoke about the water and earth, it's more oily and heavy in nature. So kapha related acne usually is associated with uh, there would be sort of obvious excess sebum secretion, oily skin, but along with that there will be other factors that's noticeable, like fluctuating weight or water retention, heaviness in the body. There could be sort of say marked lethargy or tiredness, signs of almost a classic low metabolism, low sort of thyroid kind of symptom. It doesn't have to go into hypothyroid, but there could be symptoms of lower metabolic rate, say lack of energy. This can be also associated with a constant weight gain or a fluctuating sort of weight. So depending on the associated symptoms, we actually move from seeing acne as one particular illness and trying to sort of treat it symptomatically to understanding what are the other underlying symptoms and how these are connected. Sort of, instead of super specializing into the symptom, sort of super generalize what's happening in the body and try and treat that dosha imbalance, whether if it's related to vata and there are symptoms of vata imbalance like bloatedness, constipation, we would sort of address that factor first, try and sort of help with the cleansing process so that there is not too much of toxins reabsorbed and accumulated in the body, causing the acne to manifest. We try to sort of adjust the routine of the person, which is very important when we talk about PMS as well. In Pitta sort of acne, the focus will be on reducing that acidic nature in the body. So the diet recommended can be sort of similar to say an alkaline sort of diet, but then it's not exactly based on the pH level. It's more based on Ayurvedic concept of whether a food is warming or cooling by effect of it. Once it is digested, certain food actually make us feel warm once we consume it. Say for example, red meat or any preparations made of say vinegar. Those things actually make us feel warm once we consume it, and sort of normally consumed in sort of winter time as well. And those kinds of food will be suggested to be avoided, and there could be sort of things, herbs which are cooling in nature, like for example, the most common and easily available one would be aloe vera or aloe plant. Aloe is quite cooling and balancing. The Sanskrit name for aloe is Kumari. Kumari is sort of like a, in Sanskrit means like a young woman's friend, mainly because of its multiple benefits in terms of hormonal balancing, its ability to help with hair growth, its ability to help with skin related issues, dryness, moisturizing effect, all of that together. It's considered to be one of the best friend for women, and many sort of issues related to hormonal imbalance as well. Kaphaja ones, the ones which are related to oiliness, heaviness, water retention, all the physical symptoms related to water and earth imbalance. The remedies will be more focused on trying to get the diet a bit more sort of varied, less focused on sweet, sour, salty kind of diet, which we always have, less of grains, try and sort of reduce the dairy content, which is usually quite kapha increasing, can increase mucousy nature and oiliness. It's not against oils completely, but sort of dairy products might be not ideal, best to reduce in kapha type of acne. It's also important to sort of get into some form of cleansing routine or fasting routine. Doesn't have to be like one full day of fast, but possibly like a intermittent fasting, or doing a mono diet where you are doing just khichdi, or khichdi is like a rice and lentil kind of brothy, like a porridgey kind of preparation, or any sort of simple soupy preparation for one day, giving rest to the system and enough opportunity to pacify kapha and cleanse as well. So from acne, if we think about another factor which usually creates mostly affect women is PMS, and premenstrual syndrome or premenstrual disease involves health issues that are mostly concerned with the hormonal changes just before the menstrual cycle, and can be sort of having both physical as well as mind and emotions related symptoms. It can create sort of dehydration and constipation, bloatedness, that kind of physical symptom. Breast tenderness can be there, but along with that, most women also experience tiredness, lack of energy, and sort of more vata predominant symptoms. And that's very important because PMS is sort of body's in fact a sign that body doesn't actually have the same capability physically, or body goes through different stages, especially in a hormonal cycle, where the ability to rest and recover is varied. And in certain stages, body will actually enforce it by saying that there needs to be a bit more rest than what you are normally getting, because of the kind of changes that's happening during that phase in the hormonal system and the whole reproductive system. So PMS mostly is considered as a vata imbalance state. So the treatment, in fact, more than the diet, more than any particular herbs, I think PMS needs two things. One is proper rest, and another one is equally important, is proper routine. It's very counterproductive for vata imbalance to have a routine which is not well set and based on how you feel and how you feel at that time. So there should be enough sort of focus given on opportunities to rest, opportunities to relax during the day, while continuing with the normal work and routine. I think more than if it goes into other symptoms related to, say, mental symptoms like or emotional symptoms like depression or increase in anxiety symptoms, then that needs to be approached differently based on the intensity of vata. But I think if we are talking generally in any women healthy and focused on maintaining good health, I would say rest and a good routine is the most important factor which would be helping with PMS. I think the most important thing to avoid will be any form of change in routine in terms of sleep. It's very important to avoid any sugary or highly stimulating food and drinks like say alcohol or caffeinated drinks, which will always give it will be a natural thing to go to caffeinated drinks, but whatever benefit that it gives in terms of energy levels will be lost quite quickly, and it's not easily sustainable. So it's important to sort of acknowledge the fact that some amount of extra rest is required during that phase. Natural remedies other than what we mentioned about diet, rest, and routine, there are specific herbs which, especially in the case of hormone imbalance related acne, what we normally also observe is that there are factors related to accumulation of toxins and accumulation of blood impurities, which we call in Ayurveda as rakta dosha. Blood impurities do accumulate in longer time due to hormonal variations or hormone mimicking chemicals unfortunately present in our environment and the things we use. So it's important to actually address that factors using some form of cleansing herbs. The most common, I think, two herbs which will be really helpful in sort of cleansing the system, clearing up the blood impurities will be neem. Neem is quite commonly, I think, available worldwide. It's a bitter herb. The Latin name is Azardiracta indica. It's considered to be quite pitta balancing, and at the same time, it's also a blood purifier. Similarly, blood purifying effect is also seen in Mangishta. Mangishta is rubia cordifoliates. Rubia name comes from the redness in the red pigments present in the plant, and it's I think traditionally has been used in cosmetics. I think thousands of years ago, and I think it's also used in coloring a natural fiber as well. But traditionally in Ayurveda, it's again also a pitta balancing herb, and it's also a rakta shodhana or blood cleansing, blood purifying capabilities, which helps with the acne and any imbalance related to blood impurities and pitta imbalances causing the acne symptoms or any skin related symptoms associated with the hormonal cycle. So it's Manjishta and Neem. We're trying to see how the body functions normally from the lens of doshas and Ayurvedic point of view. So from that point of view, it's important to understand what is happening naturally in a woman's body, what makes her unique in terms of health condition, treatment factors, all of that. How do we see that changes happening and the hormonal variations happening, not in terms of just the particular hormones, but try and understand what is as a whole happening in the body, not just in individual organs. For that, we need to first look at the hormonal cycle and the changes happening in two main areas. One is the ovaries and other is the uterine lining, the inside of the uterus. So primarily in the initial phase of, if we consider menstrual cycle as starting from the first day of bleeding or going on to the next cycle, the first few days, what's happening in the ovaries is maturation of the ovum or the egg inside certain cyst-like structures. It's not a cyst itself, but it's almost like a fluid-filled cyst-like structures. There are multiple ones in different stages of maturation. Call them follicles, and depending on the stage and the sort of level of the menstrual cycle, they will be in varied level of maturation. And one of them is matured, so it's more sort of a nourishing phase where the eggs are being matured with the influence from different hormones from the ovary itself, or as well as from the pituitary axis as well. And that maturation phase is very nourishing, and that's very important to note, that during the same time in the uterine lining, there is an initial sort of cleansing process happening, which happens naturally. Why is it happening naturally? Is because the process of child development of a child, a new life in the womb, has to be very, very precise. It's a very precise and very strenuous sort of an action happening in a monthly cycle. So there is no room for any error in terms of the uterine lining. So that perfection is what leads to every month the body renewing the whole lining, so that when the fertilization, if at all it happens, it is ready with as pure and new as lining for it to grow further and nourish further. So this process of renewing means there is some form of cleansing happening naturally. And in Ayurveda, when we do deeper cleansing treatments, we do acknowledge that this process of cleansing, even though it's not a complete whole body cleansing, it's a more localized cleansing, but it's happening once in a month. And when this happens, we sort of pause various cleansing treatments and then restart the treatments at the end of the cleansing, acknowledging the fact that body is already under a normal cleansing cycle. So in the uterus at this time, there is a process of cleansing happening. And similarly, like in the ovary, there is a process of re-nourishing starting. So that's sort of a kapha phase of a healthy menstrual cycle, where kapha represents nourishment, and kapha represents nourishment in the form of maturing follicles in the ovary, as well as gradual development of the lining inside the uterus. Then as we move further, one important sort of phase in that cycle will be the real maturation of one of the follicles and the ovulation, where the ovum or the egg is expelled into the outside from the ovary and gets into the uterus. So in that process of maturation, there is this first major hormonal change, and any form of enzymes, hormones, anything which is transforming or help the process of transforming is a pitta related function. It's always associated with its effect on digestion, its effect on our body temperature, how our body temperature actually elevates during that phase. And then the pitta, that cycle, that sort of change in the uterus at the same time, while this ovulation is happening, there is further nourishing and further capillaries and blood circulation improving in the uterine wall, along with the uterine muscle tissue. That's more sort of that pitta influence gradually developing, and that comes to the peak, I would say, just a week before the actual menstrual bleeding happens. That's where if you look at the hormonal variations, after the first dip in the estrogen levels, just before the ovulation, you actually tend to have further increase in estrogen as well as progesterone, which is quite something symbolizes the pitta nature at that time, and will be at the peak just before the actual menstruation happen. And at that point, based on whether there is fertilization or whether the fertilization is not happening, then the cycle moves on to again a vata phase, which will lead to cleansing and re-preparation. So naturally, the whole female body goes through this cyclic change every month, which is very important to analyze and understand, because nowadays I think a lot of new sort of personal trainers and sports trainers, they all pay into attention how and when we can maximize the training, focus on different types of activities, whether this time of the it's a strength rather than any form of disability, because you are able to learn better in some phase, you're able to sort of practice better in some phase. You might have to focus more on repair and restoration at certain phase, which is more sort of like the phase where the vata will be higher, and that sort of reflects into symptoms related to vata, like tiredness or cramps and pains, etc. So this whole change, while I'm explaining on the ovaries and the uterus and trying to simplify how these are happening in 3 different phases, it will be very interesting to note that these changes also happen in every other cell in a female body. It is happening in every other function in the female body, related to even digestion, circulation, factors related to emotions, mind, all of that. So it's not something restricted to one part of the body. It is happening all through the system, depending on a person's nature, whether they are by nature predominant in one of the dosha, whether they are predominant in vata or pitta, depending on that prakriti or their natural tendency, 1 or 2 of these stages of cycle will be a bit more visible, they'll be in slightly higher risk towards seeing symptoms related to any one particular issue at that particular time, based on their body type. So it's important to understand your body type and your nature first. That's why I started by talking about doshas, and then look at the symptom, and then look at what stage it tends to actually repeat, if it's showing a cyclic pattern, and then try to analyze the diet and plan things to rectify it. So that's what usually an Ayurvedic doctor helps when you are speaking with an Ayurvedic doctor. They will try to understand first who you are and then go into uh, analyzing the nature of your symptoms. It's not what are your symptoms, but how do they appear, what triggers it, and what can aggravate it, what tends to reduce its intensity. All of this is taken into account, and then a plan is made, which is not just herbs for symptoms. It's more related to like forming a routine, anticipating these changes before it happens, and taking precautions. And if there are deeper reasons, we focus on cleansing as well. Right. So that's mainly about healthy phases of sort of hormonal changes happening in the woman body. Now, we spoke about skin and PMS symptoms, and in general what happens there and how we can deal with it. Another important and very common condition that mostly is very commonly seen is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or polycystic ovary, or polycystic ovarian disorder. So firstly, we need to understand what it is. PCO, which is polycystic ovary. When I explained a healthy cycle, it's very normal, in fact, to have multiple follicles maturing in sort of nearby sort of maturation and to be present in the ovary at the same time. So it can have sort of like an appearance of multiple cysts, but unless it has other symptoms and impact on a person's metabolic and hormonal, as well as other symptoms associated with these hormonal changes, it is not considered as a syndrome or an illness. PCOS is much more sort of severe sort of condition where you will have one of the three symptoms. One is either actual cysts in the ovary, multiple cysts present in the ovary. The secondary symptom can be what's known as hirsutism, or excessive facial hair, or more sort of male pattern hair growth in female. There could be also a visible irregularity in the menstrual cycles rather than following the cyclic, say 26 to 28 days pattern. So if one or two, I think two of these symptoms are constantly present, it is sort of understood that there is a metabolic issue and a hormonal issue, which means that it's diagnosed more as PCOS. PCOD, or polycystic ovaries, needs to be diagnosed using, say, an ultrasound or something to look at the ovary, whereas the other one can be diagnosed based on clinical symptoms itself. But the treatments are usually quite different, because one of them do have an impact on hormones and fertility, as well as impact on the metabolic system. So this is how it is differentiated. Now, what causes it? So in order to understand the cause, you will have to remember the phases which I mentioned in the last few minutes, about how the initial phase of maturation is more kapha predominant. Kapha usually promotes nourishment, and if there is, say, the person having symptoms related to weight gain, the person has issues related to water retention, respiratory symptoms, or breathing related issues, issues related to weight gain, all the factors which we understand as kapha imbalance related, there is always a possibility that this phase can be going out of balance, where multiple cysts can form because of the maturation happening not in its right pace, and ovulation can also be restricted, causing fertility related issues. So it's more understood as a kapha related imbalance. So kapha means it will have an impact on metabolism and nourishment more than the hormonal symptoms itself. There is some aspects of pitta as well, but majorly the focus will be on kapha, and that's why there are a lot of researchers that points out how lifestyle and activities, exercises, um, regular routine activities, how does that impact positively in PCOS symptom? In an Ayurvedic point of view, we need to correct kapha imbalance using diet. Diet wise, we consider uh, dairy products and grains to be quite mucousy and heavy and kapha increasing, so that needs to be reduced. Another important factor with respect to diet and kapha dosha is the time at which meal is consumed. Not all, even though the nutritional value of a particular meal is exactly same, the time at which you consume it can have a different impact on your dosha balance. Say, for example, if you're consuming grains or these dairy products during the day, where the body has better opportunity to metabolize it and sort of balance it off, the effect on kapha will be slightly lesser compared to having it too late in the day or nearer to the sleep. So it's very important to avoid or keep your evening meal quite light and easy to digest. When I say light, it doesn't have to be like completely carb free. There can be sort of vegetables, root vegetables, even potatoes, sweet potato, carrot, beetroot, any form of vegetables. It can be prepared into various dishes using curries, using spices or oils. All of that is fine, but it's best to avoid bread or pasta or rice and wheat and anything which is grain. And it's also better to avoid any dairy products and use instead other vegetable oils or vegetable products in the evening. That would make sure that the kapha is not increasing, particularly because of the time of the day. In terms of herbs, there are various herbs that are quite effective in PCOS, especially with improving the metabolic rate and bringing the kapha dosha really down. And I think the one of the most effective which I've seen in my practice is a very simple spice which we use very commonly in Indian cooking, that is fenugreek. Fenugreek is used quite commonly it's a bitterish herb commonly used in Indian curry preparation. So if you can include into your regular routine, like start your day with a glass of fenugreek tea, you can soak the seeds overnight and have it as a tea in the morning by adding hot water to it, and also try and sort of chew the seeds and take it as well to get the full benefit from that. You can also include it as part of your diet by sprouting these seeds and sprinkling it on top of your food. Fenugreek is known to actually have an effect on the cholesterol level, fat metabolism in general. It has an effect on body weight. It has an effect on hormone balance as well. So it's a very commonly available, very simple spice which you can include regularly if you are suffering from any of the PCOS related symptoms. It's also good to sort of focus on your lifestyle, see if there is a stronger kapha involvement, which is normally the case, and try and sort of include dietary changes and time wise changes to help with the kapha imbalance. Menopause is something which is vastly misunderstood sometimes as a particular illness or a particular condition, without having sort of focused on what are the different stages of it and how it is different in different situations. And it might be also interesting to look at whether menopause has any benefits at all, or whether it is something which is completely sort of disturbing the normal sort of lifestyle and routine in a person. So menopause has a huge sort of a benefit in terms of metabolic system wise. There is a, like I said in the last I think few minutes, we were talking about how body perceives this business of reproductive function and providing the right apparatus for the growth of the fetus. It's taken quite seriously, and it's quite a energy intense process. To keep on repeating that beyond a certain level will put huge risk of various other illnesses and nutritional deficiency uh, in females. So it's very important to understand that body is taking a pause, and that comes with the benefit that all those energy and nutritional aspects are now available to be utilized in regular body function, which means that there is a new wave of abilities, new wave of possibilities, and energy and focus and different impact of this nutritional availability becomes possible because of the menopause. But when we look at a health perspective, it definitely has quite a strong impact in terms of quality of life. There could be factors related to menopause that can disturb regular routine and life. So we need to look at in two different stages. One is the perimenopausal stage, where the body is actually slowly approaching this pause of the hormonal cycles. And in this phase usually is very important because most of the symptoms that we consider as menopausal, like related to hot flushes or sleep related issues, weight related weight gain, all of these are mostly appearing in this stage. And post menopause, it's important to note that the changes are more vata related in the sense there will be more issues related to degeneration, especially bones and joints. There could be like dryness related to skin and mucous membrane, factors related to digestion. So almost all the symptoms actually move on to dry and cold territory, whereas in the perimenopausal phase the issues are mostly concerned with pitta. There are factors responsible for that, not just there is a natural change happening, but at the same time there are factors related to our lifestyle, environment, various chemicals and pesticides that we use, which all influence the hormones. And the way our hormonal system functions is a very in a very fragile and sort of complex mechanism related to not just our reproductive organ, related to our pituitary, all the hypothalamus and all the controlling hormones as well. So any exposure to hormone like products through our modern lifestyle, or any sort of exposure to contraceptives or medications which might actually also impact this fragile balance, can put us at extra risk. But beyond that, Ayurveda also looks at who is at a higher risk towards some of these symptoms. So perimenopausal phase, if we look at it, it's most of the symptoms are related to excessive pitta, and pitta imbalance usually manifests as a change in fire element. An impact of fire element is usually heat, sweating quite easily, sensitivity in the skin, headaches. It can cause weight gain because our body's metabolic system always understands that there is excess heat and higher metabolism, so that needs to be lowered. But that's sort of like a misunderstanding due to the imbalance. So who is at higher risk of having most of the symptoms? I've seen a lot of people who say that it went like a breeze and I didn't even realize, and it's perfectly fine during this phase. And the perimenopausal phase will become really difficult for somebody who is already having pitta imbalance, and pitta is causing almost heat related symptoms, or skin sensitivity, or factors related to say digestion or acidity, headaches, or other signs of inflammation. All of that is mostly concerned with pitta. Then you are at a higher risk of having most of these symptoms in slightly high intensity. So it's very important to notice that based on your nature, whether you are at higher risk, then how you can take certain precautions. For example, pitta is always aggravated by having food that is quite acidic in nature, and it can include alcohol, it can include coffee, unfortunately all the tasty things like chocolate or certain grains like corn or wheat, these all are considered to be quite acidic. So you will have to look at changing your diet into more sort of cooling, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of good hydration. Try and include cooling ingredients into your diet. Like, cooling doesn't mean like temperature wise cold. It can be even herbal teas, like warm teas, but it's still made of, say, cooling aspects, like cooling spices like fennel and coriander. You can also use licorice as a tea. These are all quite cooling. Specifically, remedy wise, the focus is on reducing pitta, depending on how severe is the symptom, whether it has gone into deeper symptoms or is disturbing regular lifestyle. Then there will be sort of cleansing treatments recommended. Otherwise, it's mostly including these cooling things, and cooling can also be achieved through diet by including coconutty products, coconut as a whole, coconut water, coconut oil. All of these are considered to be quite cooling, and that can re-normalize the metabolic system. Another factor which we spoke about during speaking about acne is aloe vera. It's also quite good and quite cooling in nature. You could use it as a aloe vera juice, but most of them unfortunately contains preservatives and all range of different flavoring and chemicals, etc. So it might be good idea to get like a good organic dehydrated aloe powder, which contains nothing other than just aloe, and rehydrate it using a little bit of hot water, add it to smoothies or juices, and try and include that regularly. It can be quite bitter and might have a mild laxative effect, but if it's not bothering too much and not creating any trouble, it can be safely taken to counteract some of the symptoms related to pitta imbalance. There are specific herbs that are recommended during this stage, especially in Ayurveda. Most commonly, we prescribe a herb called shatavari. Shatavari is Asparagus racemosus. Nowadays, it's available as capsules and extracts and mixed with different things in even regular pharmacy. But I would suggest sticking on to a less acidic and cooling kind of a diet primarily, and then taking supplements or specific herbs if required, with the guidance of somebody who can sort of assess the requirement and also see what's the benefit of it. So try and see that it's not actually just too sort of symptom based. Then the body's ability to naturally create that feedback loop is also affected. Postmenopausal, the biggest risk related to postmenopausal change will be to somebody who already has a vata related symptom. Say, for example, somebody who already has osteoarthritis or degenerative conditions related to bone. If there is a natural tendency to not gain weight or lose weight even, and also has issues related to sleep, anxiety, difficulty in sort of relaxing and resting. So sort of like a high vata symptoms. If you're already having vata nature, then postmenopausal stage will be actually a bit more difficult and bit more needs a bit more focus rather than the changes leading towards menopause. So at this stage, vata will create more dryness, which will be visible externally. There could be other impact of vata as well, which is not concerned with just dryness. There could be factors related to constipation. There could be, even in severe cases, issues related to prolapse, issues related to weakness of muscles in the pelvic area, issues related to hemorrhoids, or it can also cause various joints and bone related issues as well. So it's important to sort of anticipate, if you are having vata related nature, some increase in the vata symptoms related to dryness and coldness. And the coldness can come on to sort of affecting the sleep, creating restless leg syndrome, creating sort of inability to rest without interruptions at night. So try and sort of understand that this might happen, and try to sort of include a vata pacifying diet. And vata, which we mentioned sort of briefly during talking about PMS, it's important to actually schedule rest into the routine, because Vata nature always promotes activity and will make a person do things, multiple things even at the same time. So it's important to schedule rest and routine. And a routine is very, very important in terms of routine and lifestyle. Vata benefits the most is with two simple things. One is use of oils, another is use of good amount of fluids or hydration. So it's important to actually make sure that even if you're not feeling thirsty, fit it into your routine to have a good sort of quantity of fluid intake. Make sure you are having lots of herbal teas and warm liquid rather than cold or chilled liquids, which can again increase Vata. Instead, have more warming spices like gingery kind of teas and cumin or other cardamom, cinnamon, turmeric. All of these are quite good in pacifying Vata and helping with the reducing the dryness that may develop. Oils can be used internally as well as externally. I would always suggest to bring it into the lifestyle, some form of oil application and sort of steam bath or a hot bath into a weekly routine, like once or twice a week, depending on how much the dryness is manifesting externally on the skin or in the joints. It's most effective if you are doing it regularly. It doesn't have to be like with loads of oil. Very small quantity of oil applying on, mainly focusing on the joints, and leave it there for 15 to 20 minutes and then take a hot bath to help the sort of absorption of the benefits from the oil. It's also good to include healthy oils in your diet, like it could be olive oil or ghee, or it could be even oily food like avocados. It's good to include like oily fish, nuts and seeds, depending on your routine, depending on what you prefer. Try and include these nuts and seeds and oil-rich food. It's much more better than taking supplements or omega-3, omega-6 sort of combinations. It's best to actually get these from food itself. Body actually absorbs these better when we consume it directly from food, and it has the opportunity to absorb based on what's required. So two major lifestyle changes I would recommend is use of oils and externally, internally, and hydration. Herbs wise, post-menopausal change, like I mentioned, is more Vata related. So it's good to include some form of a rejuvenating, calming kind of herb like ashwagandha. You can also include like a ashwagandha milk drink. Try and bring it to your habit of taking it in the evening before going to bed. If you're all right with milk, that'll also sort of supply, if it's good quality milk, it will supply nutrition necessary for your bones and joints. Or you can take a plant-based milk and add ashwagandha and have it as a warm drink at night, which will help with sleep and which will also help with bones and joints as well. Diet-wise, it's important to have smaller meals, more number of times, rather than having 3 heavy meals. You might notice in this phase the appetite might actually go low, but that's not actually something to worry of. It's just because the postmenopausal stage is slightly less nutrition intensive compared to the hormonal variations happening before that. So the appetite can go a little bit lower. So try and sort of adjust the portion size and have more warm and cooked preparations instead of having colder ones, because that will be, warmer ones will be partially digested and will be much more easier to break down and absorb and make it easier during this transition phase. And after that, based on seasonal changes and what you prefer, you can actually include salads as well. Or if you get in touch with one of Ayurvedic practitioners, they can guide you also based on your own body type, whether you need to stick to a Vata diet for a prolonged period of time, or it's sufficient for a short duration. I think it's also good if you are all right and comfortable with taking ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. That's also considered to be very nourishing, and it also keeps the digestive fire good.